hard worker, open door, communicator. Okay, now, we're not going to make a decision this evening. I don't know if
Yes.
you're aware of that. We have a meeting tomorrow morning.
Okay.
So hopefully, if things go well, we'll make a decision then. And
Excellent, thank you.
you should receive a phone call one way or the other tomorrow.
Excellent, thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure to meet you all.
Yes.
Thank you for
nice
the
to meet-
opportunity to interview.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know why I'm echoing.
Thanks. I don't deserve a
Safe
sir.
trip back.
I don't rate that. Very nice to meet you.
Steps, or do you want to go in the elevator? Two ways. Probably shouldn't have made that comment.
Good evening. Hi.
Oops, let me just get,
Jamie Goodwin, nice to meet you. Hi, Becca.
Rebecca, how are you? Do you go by Becca? Becca. Okay, thank you.
Hey, Becky. Good to see you again. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, just trying to,
Get to the right place.
I had everything together neatly. And as usual, it's messed up. Okay.
Hey, do you want to switch up the order? Jamie, you want to start?
I was gonna do that,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
okay? But it's usually a good idea if you ask your same questions if somebody hasn't asked it. So, Becca, tell us a little bit about you and why you chose. I disturb it.
Good to know they're working. So my name is Becca Meekins. I am a resident of Spencer. My wife and I purchased a home there a couple years ago. I have been an assistant town administrator in 2 central Massachusetts communities. I have thoroughly enjoyed what I do in the assistant role. My ultimate career goal is to be a town manager, town administrator in a community, a smaller size community in Massachusetts. I did receive my master's in public administration from Clark University. So, you know, it took me a while to get there, but this is my career path. It's something I love to do. It's my passion. I applied to Sturbridge very intentionally. Living in Spencer, my wife and I spend a considerable amount of time and money, frankly, in Sturbridge, which is good. It really has a lot of amenities that we enjoy, food. We have dogs, so we've spent some time outdoors here. And it's a place that I've really grown to feel like is sort of a second home, and a community that I really value. And so I wasn't necessarily looking to make the jump to town administrator right now, but I felt like this was an opportunity that I just couldn't pass up, given my connection to the community. And I think that there's a potential for a mutually beneficial relationship here. I think I have a lot to offer, and I think I have some skills that you all are looking for. And so that's why I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Jamie?
Sure. How much has an assistant, so you've been an assistant town administrator in Grafton, in Northborough. How much, in terms of labor stability, have those communities had issues with their unions or anything like that?
I wouldn't say we've had issues with unions.
There always something.
Yeah. In Grafton, the relationship was fairly stable. There was a single police union and a local association, the Grafton Municipal Employee Association, which contains administrative staff as well as DPW staff. There is no fire union in Grafton because they are one of the final all volunteer call departments in Massachusetts. And so towards the end of my tenure there, we were working towards building a full career department. So that is certainly in Grafton's future. But we had a good relationship. I, as part of the negotiating team for the town, sat at the table, costed out all of the contracts, proposals, things like that. So I'm very familiar with that process, putting together comps to present to the union at the beginning of negotiations. I think that's a really important part of negotiations, is making sure that we're all on the same page, we know where we're starting from, that they have an understanding of the financial condition of the town. The town has limitations in terms of what it can offer, and we just all need to be realistic about what those are going into it. In Northborough, I also participate on the town side of the bargaining table. Northborough does have 4 units. So it's a local association which contains administrative staff as well as DPW, 2 police unions, patrol and sergeant, and then a fire union. And all of our contracts are up this June 30th, 2021. So we are knee-deep in negotiations as we speak. But the process in Northborough is largely similar. Experience costing out contracts, proposals, putting comps together, presenting financial data up front, and just being honest and realistic about what we can propose. Obviously, this year is a little bit different because the ARPA funds have sort of entered the discussion, which previously, that wasn't a resource that we had to offer. And so that's certainly something to keep in mind.
Well, how many people are in Northborough?
Northborough is a community of about 15,000.
What challenges have you discovered working there?
In Northborough? Northborough is a community that is, I would say, mature in its growth stage. There's not a lot of available space left for development in Northborough. It experienced sort of its economic boom in the mid-2000s, 2009, 2010, had the expansion of a very large mall in Northborough. There are very few parcels left for development. So any remaining new growth that the town sees is going to be any redevelopment of existing parcels, which obviously is limited in terms of income to the community. So one of the challenges that Northborough has looking forward is figuring out how to maintain and sustain the community, given the limited new growth that it will likely experience in years to come. And so that's something that, we're well aware of. There is excess levy capacity in Northborough now, but, costs go up not down. And so when you look at the constraints of Proposition 2.5, reducing state aid as a percentage of your overall budget, you really have to think long-term about how to be resourceful and sustainable.
Great. So I see that you went to Clark. They have a 5-year, like, you go for 4, you get the 5th, is that?
Yeah, that's why my parents made me go there.
How did you like it there?
Clark was great. I had always had a general interest in municipal government. My mother was a city council for the city of Burlington, Vermont. I grew up in Vermont. And so I'd always sort of been aware of it. I didn't know that it was what I wanted to do until I got to Clark. And I ended up in the 5-year program, in the MPA program. And it just so happens that I interned with the town of Grafton as part of my MPA, and the rest is history, as they say.
Where in Vermont you grew up?
Colchester.
Yeah. Let somebody else go.
Oh, no,
Okay, Becca, how are you?
Good. Good to see you again.
Thank you, you too. Are you familiar with the town meeting form of government?
Yes. Yes, I'm comfortably aware of town meeting form of government. Both Grafton and Northborough have open town meeting form of government.
And do you have any issues presenting at town meeting, getting up and speaking on behalf of the board on a project? And
No, so I've done that in Grafton, and I do that in Northborough. Our town meeting is actually Monday in Northborough, so I'm preparing now, as my responsibility as HR director is to present any personnel changes, any personnel bylaw changes to town meeting. And this year, we've completed a classification compensation review, a full review of the complete plan. And so all those changes have to be presented to town meeting on Monday night, and so that'll be my responsibility.
And economic development, is there a certain project that you're proud of that you've been a part of?
Yeah, so when I was in Grafton I think is more similar to Sturbridge with respect to its sort of stage of growth. Grafton is also a community that values things like open space, conservation, and so there was always this sort of delicate balance of what is often referred to as smart growth. So really being intentional about the parcels that we chose to market for development, being specific about the kinds of projects that we wanted to see come forward, and being very upfront with applicants about that process. And so, we had a regular development team meeting is what we called it. So it's a standing weekly meeting with all the permitting department heads where anybody who had an idea could come in and sort of talk it out. And find out sort of what the limitations would be to the idea. Those department heads have a good comprehension of sort of where their boards and committees fall in terms of what will fly, what probably won't fly, what kinds of roadblocks they may hit. And so having all those discussions up front, I think is really helpful, not only for the applicant, but also for the town, to sort of massage things as they come along to make sure that you don't get a project dropped in your lap that you realize this is not really what the community wants to see. So to that end, in Grafton, we partnered with the state for basically a land transfer of the old Grafton State Hospital, which is a large property on Route 30 in Grafton. And at that time, the governor was really pushing his Open for Business initiative. So the state agreed to basically give us the land if we were to market it and put out an RFP and ultimately develop it. We were able to do that. We ended up with a mixed-use development, 350 apartment units with a mixed-use component on the bottom, about a mile from the MBTA station. So, in terms of the location, it was great. It's about a mile to Tufts University. So we were confident that the units would get filled. And as a result of that project, we also got a $500,000 MassWorks grant to extend the sewer line up Route 30 to get sewer to that location. So it was a mutually beneficial project for both the state and for the town. And it's something, it's funny because I left before it finished, but I still drive by Route 30, and man, they've cut a lot of trees down, and it's going up. So that's it's exciting.
Yeah, great. And how's your relation with staff and residents? Do you have an open door policy?
Absolutely. I feel like being an ATA, it's a very unique position, being an assistant. Sometimes you can get caught in the middle between your TA, your board, your staff. And so you really sort of have to fine-tune interpersonal skills to sort of manage those conflicts. And I've had experience doing that in the 2 other communities that I've served in. And I feel like human resources is one of my strengths. I get along well with people for the most part. I'm always happy to listen to a resident, about any issue, civilly disagree. I think that's the beautiful thing about government, is that we can disagree and still be civil. And sometimes that gets lost a little bit, but it's something I feel really passionate about. And so, yeah, I've always had an open door policy, very collaborative sort of way of working with people. I like to sort of sit and brainstorm and talk things through and get other perspectives, because I think that's when the best comes out.
You come from 2 kind of similar towns, and you feel that would benefit you coming to Sturbridge. You feel comfortable managing Sturbridge?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I feel like I've honed a lot of the skills that I think you all are looking for. In Grafton, I was heavily focused on finance. They didn't have a finance director in Grafton, so I was independently responsible for developing the annual budget, and seeing that through from the very beginning stages in the fall, when the budget memo goes out to department heads, all the way to presentation to the Board of Selectmen for the budget hearing ahead of town meeting. So, excuse me. I feel like in terms of finance, those skills were really honed in Grafton. And in Northborough, my position is largely human resources. I function as the human resources director for the town. And so all of the HR, the trainings, the performance evaluations, all of the reporting to the clearinghouse for DOT, for all of the drug testing of the DPW employees, I do all of that. Managing employee conflicts, discipline, and firing, recruitment. I've done all of that in Northborough. So I feel like, the combined, my experience in each of those communities has sort of prepared me for the next step. And, like I said at the beginning, I wasn't necessarily looking to take the step right now, but I really do feel like this is an opportunity that I just couldn't pass up. And I feel like could be really mutually beneficial for Sturbridge and for me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kind of covered a project that, through your other questions, so, over the last 2 years of dealing with COVID and being in municipal government, is there one thing that you took away, either as a learning experience or a positive, that you think came out of the whole scenario?
I think that for me, what COVID has done in terms of my professional life working in local government, it's sort of like catapulted us into the 21st century. I really feel like, government, they always say, watch what happens in the public sector and then wait 2 years. Watch what happens in the private sector and then wait 2 years, and then it happens in the public sector. Everything moves slow, and it's slow intentionally and with good reason, but that's the reality. And I feel like COVID, it was like it came at us 100 miles an hour, and we had no choice but to adapt. And so a lot of those, I think, changes that we had to make with respect to remote work, our ability to sort of pivot very quickly, be flexible with our staff, be flexible with our residents. I think those are changes that are here to stay. There are changes that were happening in the private sector before, and I think if we want to continue to be competitive and attract and retain and recruit high-quality professional staff, we have to start looking at doing things a little bit differently than they've been done in the past. And I think COVID sort of, that was a train coming at us 100 miles an hour, whereas, typically it probably would have taken a lot longer, but it's here, and I think it's here to stay.
So kind of in a follow-up to that, what kind of a work schedule do you prefer? Are you more of an in-person? Would you want to be in person 5 days a week? Would you prefer 1 day a week, or you'll be working remotely?
I I like people. I work better when I'm in the work environment. I also really value work-life balance, and I found that for myself, not for everybody, but for myself, it's hard for me to separate the two when I'm in a working from home environment. It was really challenging for me through the pandemic to sort of, the line got really blurry with respect to when I'm working and when I'm home. And that's something that's really important to me and that I value and that I think I value for my staff as well. And so that's a challenge. And so for myself, I like being on site. It's just, I'm a person who is routine oriented. And so I like to get up at the same time, eat the same thing for breakfast, get in the car. It's just the way I function. But I recognize that not everybody functions that way best. And so again, part of this change and figuring out how to attract people and retain people is, things are going to need to be a little bit more flexible, I think, going forward.
I'm gonna go to Mary and then circle back at the
Okay.
end. Yeah.
Before I ask my regular questions, Becca, I had noticed on your resume, twice it's listed for Grafton as assistant to the town administrator. Now, is there a change in the
Yeah.
position?
So when I came out of grad school, I had been interning with the town of Grafton. And at the exact same time that I graduated, administrative assistant in the Board of Selectmen's office retired, and they offered me a job. And so I started my municipal career with Grafton. I left to pursue other opportunities. I worked for the town of Weston briefly. I worked for the Newton Housing Authority. And then I came back to Grafton at my prior boss's request. They were sort of in a difficult position where someone was out on leave and they needed somebody to just help out. And so that was the assistant to the town administrator. And then the assistant town administrator took another position, and I was appointed assistant town administrator. So
It was just
a little
kind of
back and forth, but
confused, and I didn't know if they had a big gum,
Yeah, they gotta use some other words, right?
just to confuse me. What direct budget experience have you had?
so my experience in Grafton was incredibly hands-on with respect to the annual operating budget. Like I mentioned before, Grafton doesn't have a finance director, so the finance director role in that community really falls on the shoulders of the assistant town administrator. So from the very beginning in the fall, setting the budget memo to go out to department heads, setting up a meeting with the assessor's office to go through new growth, looking at our financial trend forecasting system to see, what we were looking at for the upcoming year, taking stock of the last 10 years, and then looking forward 5 years. We utilize the FTMS model, which is an ICMA preferred model for projections, and which uses key financial indicators. It looks back 10 years, looks forward 5 years. And I think that's really valuable because absent something like COVID, which obviously is a sort of hopefully once in a lifetime, there really are not a lot of surprises about where you're going to be in the next year. It's fairly formulaic if you have a good grasp on your development, and everything else sort of falls into place. The challenge is obviously on the expense side, and so I've had the budget meetings with department heads. I've told people no, not this year. So I've had those difficult discussions, all the way to developing the budget document as a communication tool, presenting it to the Board of Selectmen. When I was in Grafton, they received their first GFOA award, which is a sort of a third-party stamp of approval on your budget document, which I think is a really good thing for communities, particularly for boards, to be able to hold up to the community and say, look, we've been telling you that we're doing this right, but here's a neutral third party that also says that we're doing it right. And that was a goal of mine, a goal that the board in Grafton had set for me, and that we were able to achieve.
Gee, Okay, have you had negotiation experience directly or indirectly?
So I was at the table, both in Grafton and Northborough, and I, draft proposals along with the town administrator and labor attorney. Costed out all proposals that were given and received, put together all the comps to look at your comparable communities. And that process, I think, is the most critical part of bargaining, is making sure everybody is on the same page to start, making sure that you're in agreement about what your comps are. If you run an ALS fire service where you can't be comparing to a community that doesn't, because it's not the same thing. And so having those discussions up front at the beginning, I think, is important. So I was at the table, when I was in Grafton. We didn't get to arbitration, but we did get to mediation, and it's draining. It can be very draining. And the one thing that I've learned is to keep coming back to the table. It can be challenging. I think a lot of times people take things personally, egos get in the way, but at the end of the day, you're representing the community. You got to do what's best for the community, and you can't get up and walk away. You got to keep coming back to the table. I think that's very important.
Okay. Let me write this down so I won't be able to read it.
Because you have that poor penmanship.
Better than yours, Jamie, and I talked.
But I can read it. Yeah, this is a dance that has been danced for a lot of years.
I had Jamie in third grade.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. What do you think is a successful working relationship between the board and town administrator?
New England is so unique, right? The open town meeting form of government, people from other places come here and they're like, what the heck are you guys doing? But it is, I love it so much. I love the concept of open town meeting, democracy at it's in its purest form, people standing up in an auditorium waving their fists, but that's how it was at the beginning, and so that's true. So anyway, I really love this this setup, this design, and I think that, I really truly understand the role of a town administrator, and that it's not a CEO. And I think that a lot of times town managers and town administrators get confused about what their role is, and they think they're the CEO. You are the CEO. You are the charge. I am just the conduit, right? I'm just the facilitator. You are charging me with the policy and the directive, and it's my job to figure out how to get it done. As long as it's moral, ethical, and legal, right? I mean, that's pretty much the gig. And I love that sort of balance, and that sort of more team aspect, instead of, it's not super hierarchical, it's more group oriented, collaborative, and it's something that I think that when it works well, it's great. Obviously, sometimes it doesn't work well, but when we are in harmony and we're getting stuff done, it's great.
Okay, and how do you communicate with not just the board, but town employees and department heads?
Yes, so I've worked for two different kinds of managers. I've worked for the manager that's never in his office, and I've worked for the manager that never leaves his office. And I believe that the balance is somewhere in between. I think that I want to be visible to my employees. I want to be available to them, but I also want to be in the community, and I want to be visible to the community, and I want to be accessible to the community. So it's a balance, but I feel like communication is one of my strengths, open, transparent communication. I like my staff to be updated. I like you to be updated. I never want you to hear about something and not have heard it from me first. I never want you to be caught off guard because somebody in the public asks you about something and for you not to know the answer. That's my job, to make sure that you're informed, whether it's a structure fire or it's a new project proposal or some internal scuffle. You have to know, because if someone asks you and you don't know, that's a very, very difficult position to be in, and it's my job to make sure that you're not in that position.
Okay, do you have, or do you intend on having regular meetings with department heads?
Absolutely, yes.
You do that now, or is that the town administrator's job?
Yeah, no, we have staff meeting. We have monthly staff meeting in Northborough. I would probably prefer that it be more often. I think something closer to biweekly is probably more along my style. Like I said, I want to be visible and accessible to my staff. And I want them to feel comfortable and know that at the end of the day that I have their back. And the way that that's done is through open, honest, regular communication.
Okay, how do you handle situations with, difficult situations with employees, whether it's complaints from a citizen about someone or another employee complaining about an employee, or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the nature of the complaint, right? If it's immoral, unethical, or illegal, that's a problem. That's a significant disciplinary, potentially termination problem. If it's interpersonal issues between employees, which is just the reality of the workplace, I try to get a really clear understanding of sort of what the issue is, because typically it's not just that people don't like one another. We're all human beings and we all have things going on outside of work. I'll give you a perfect example. I have an employee in Northborough who their department head, they had an anger outburst at their staff in the middle of the day in the office, like yelling. People down the hall could hear it. It was tough. Obviously, that's something that can't go unaddressed. So, come to find out, she had been going through some difficult things at home, her personal life. There was also a level of frustration that she had because she was pushed into a department head, not pushed, she was given a department head level position, a management position for the first time in the middle of the pandemic, and wasn't given really a lot of directive or training from her superior. And she had been unable to express this, and it had caused a lot of stress and frustration for her because she felt like she didn't have the tools or the resources to do her job effectively. And so, being a manager, you gotta take some responsibility for that. Because, like it or not, we have to provide our staff with the tools to be successful at their job. And so, we got her into a leadership development program, which I just attended her graduation today, so she just wrapped that up. And things have smoothed over in the office, and she now feels like she has the skills and the tools that she needs to be an effective manager. And so, I think those are, we want to work with our staff. We want them to feel confident. We want them to be professional, but we have to sort of set the expectation of, what does that mean? And so, I'm a firm believer in set expectation early and set it often. And that's the best way to manage.
Okay, and do you see any challenges that Sturbridge is facing?
So I know that there are some financial challenges facing Sturbridge. I did review some of your budgets, your projections. I know that you've been impacted significantly by COVID due to the fact that you have a lot of hotel meals and room tax. Obviously, it frustrates me greatly because the state, I really feel like, has not make good on its promise to municipalities, and sort of time and time again has let municipalities down. And I think COVID is just another example of, the state exceeded their revenue projections. They have a lot more flexibility with respect to how they get revenue. They have capital gains tax, income tax. Those things weren't affected by the pandemic. The people that were affected were the municipalities, the people who rely on hotel and meals and tax. That makes up a significant portion of your revenue. And municipalities don't have any tools to combat that. You're already constrained by Proposition 2.5, so you're already limited by what you can increase. And state aid continues to shrink. It's not keeping up with inflation. Chapter 90 is worth like 2/3 of what it was worth 10 years ago with respect to buying power. They refused to increase it to $300 million, even though that's what municipalities have been saying that they've needed for years. Chapter 70, they won't give $100 per pupil. They keep passing it at $30 per pupil, and especially now, schools need resources. Children are suffering. They have suffered through COVID. Teachers have suffered, and communities need resources to sort of build back the education system. And so I really, put a lot of pressure back on the state and the legislative delegation to say, like, what are you doing for us? These are our priorities. Are you championing Sturbridge? Because that's what you're supposed to do as a representative. And so, I think that looking ahead, finding ways to mitigate those challenges and sort of balance expectations with the need for growth, ultimately, to continue to sustain a community, you have to have growth. What it looks like, that's the conversation that we can have, but that's how we're gonna get our revenue. So I look forward to having those conversations with you all.
I know the MMA for years is always pushing for the local communities. We've been very fortunate in our state rep and our state senator who have always advocated very well for Sturbridge. At one time, we even had 2 state reps because we kind of split, worked out even better. How's the relationship with Northborough and your state rep and state senator?
It's great. We have I'm on a first name basis with our reps, and I think that's important. Every year in Northborough, we go through a process where we lay out the town's legislative priorities. We deliver them by way of letter to our delegation and to the governor, and then we invite them into a Board of Selectmen meeting to go through them, so that every year there's no question about what Sturbridge wants or needs. And this year we actually did something a little different where we not only put our legislative priorities together, but we also put together a list of earmark requests and handed them to our delegation ahead of time. Because what happens with earmarks is you get a call from a representative at like the 11th hour. They're on the floor of the State House and they're like, I need a project. I can stick it in this bill, but I need to know, how much is, and so we wanted to lay those out ahead of time so there's no question. If you get that opportunity, any one of these will do. And here's the cost estimate, here's the reason, so that they can't ever come back and say, well, you didn't answer my call, you didn't answer my email, I missed the window. Given the amount of federal dollars that's coming through the pipeline with the infrastructure bill, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for those kinds of things. And so I think it's really important that you all communicate those needs to your representatives.
Okay, that's all I have. Does anybody else have any follow-up questions?
No?
Do you have any questions for us?
What do you think the most important skill is that the town administrator of Sturbridge needs to be successful?
I would say communication.
Okay.
Experience, a whole list, but communication.
I would say facilitating communication.
Day-to-day management, managing the small things, and then just kind of coming to us with some of the bigger stuff.
Yeah. What is something that you're excited about for the future of Sturbridge?
Spring.
You and me both.
No, Sturbridge is an exciting, vibrant community.
Absolutely.
You know, there's a lot of community activities. You know, there's a lot of community needs. Town meeting just approved a senior center. However, there's other things in the pipeline. The DPW garage, it's actually, they call it the town barn because it's not much better than a barn. The safety complex is over 30 years old. All those things will be coming through. And, you know, we do have to be careful on loans we take out and everything, but it's a growing community, but it's growing slowly, and people like that pace, and it's a balance between, you know, what kind of growth we want. We have different thoughts on that. Some people would like nothing but open space. Other people would see nothing but businesses going up. But with our zoning, you know, it's regulated. We have tight zoning. We get complaints often that, oh, it's too difficult to do something. But it's really not if you go through the proper process. And our zoning bylaws and everything are voted by the townspeople. Board of Selectmen didn't come up with them, so. But it's an exciting town.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you guys think about the future?
I mean, being on the younger side of things and being relatively new to Sturbridge, especially for Sturbridge, you can find a lot of families that have been here for a very long time. It's exciting for me that there is going to be some rollover as people have found Sturbridge as a commutable town to Boston and Worcester and Springfield. And then with telecommuting, you know, it makes a really convenient location where they can come here and work from home 3 or 4 days a week. And if they need to shoot into the office in Boston, then it makes a great option. So I think being more attractive for those people, and then simultaneously trying to responsibly grow and maybe find that, you know, maybe not that one big project that's going to help, you know, background fund us to help take the burden off the homeowners in town, and kind of trying to find a commercial project or something that's going to help with that has proven to be pretty difficult on what people are going to accept. And we now have neighboring communities who are possibly going to put an Amazon in, and we're going to reap none of the rewards, and we're going to see all the traffic. So just trying to find a way to responsibly grow and hope that we can land something that will help in the future.
Right, we are fortunate, as you mentioned, with the hotel, motel, and meals tax. We get about $100,000 a year and above on that. And of course, as you also said, with COVID,
Yeah,
you know, we lost, but it seems to have picked up. So
that's good. That's good.
we have to do our job, so go out and eat.
Right.
We do have we have thriving restaurants, and it's nice to see, and they're growing. We're adding
Oh, I know, and
more in the
it's-
pipeline. So
And
yeah,
it's quite a wedding venue now with the public house in the village, in the barn, the Table 3
like you said,
complex there.
we took a big hit when weddings were canceled for a year. You know,
Oh,
that was
yeah.
a huge hit to business in town.
Oh, yeah.
Both directly and indirectly. So.
Do you have any other questions?
No, but I will mention, because you mentioned the public safety complex, there's a bill in the legislature to create a municipal public safety building authority, and so, which would be similar to the MSBA or the MBLC, where the state would fund a portion of public safety complexes. And I think that that's something that would be incredibly valuable to municipalities, and so I really encourage you to let your state reps know.
Availed ourselves of the SMBA for the high school that we built, and also the addition and renovation to the elementary school. However, on the other hand, there was nothing available for the senior center.
Exactly, yeah, precisely.
So
It's
it'd be
too bad,
nice.
especially with the aging infrastructure, you know. There's a lot of work to be done in our cities and towns, so.
Right, the safety complex, it was state-of-the-art when it was built, but that was 31 years ago, and times have changed, even the communication center down there, so
Absolutely.
things don't stand still. Okay, now, we're not making any decision this evening. We do have a meeting tomorrow morning, so we'll make our decision then, and you'll get a call one way or the other sometime tomorrow.
Okay. Well, it's great to meet you all.
Good to meet you.
If you don't end up here, congrats.
And still drive home in the daylight.
Nice to meet you.
Familiar with Sturbridge. I have family around in the area. Grew up going to Sturbridge Village.
Oh, yeah, everybody
Yeah.
used to,
You went to
but,
school in Massachusetts, you went to the village.
yeah, but now they've changed things. They don't get as much because the curriculum isn't in it. So,
Shame.
we used to go to Lowell. Do you guys remember going to Lowell? Well, it wasn't in the third grade curriculum anymore, so it's,
Carol children had fun, huh?
yeah.
Learn about how children used to
I
work.
thought that's what part of education was, but, so, good evening, Caitlin.
Good
Do they
evening.
call you Caitlin or Kate or?
Caitlin, Kate.
Okay, so, to get started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in Sturbridge?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I just want to thank everyone for your time here tonight. It's definitely an honor to be a finalist. So I am here as I'm bringing over around 12 years of experience working in municipalities, but also with municipalities, my time at the MMA. I'm an impassioned, fan of local government, but I believe in it. I like good governance and processes, and I like helping people. And that has ultimately led me to local government. I got the municipal bug at my time at the MMA. I quickly found out that on the local level is really where you can have the biggest impact to people's day-to-day lives. So for me, once I found that out, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So from there, I got my doubles master's of MPA in political science at Suffolk, and I've made communities I've worked in. I've worked in HR, I've worked in communication, worked in economic development, and I always knew I wanted to be on the management path. And right now I'm in the town of Dover, where I'm the assistant town administrator. And, I handle all the HR and procurement, and, this is what I like to do. I like to help people. I like to solve problems. So when I saw this position open, I had to take chance on the opportunity. Sturbridge is, similar to some of the towns I've worked in, but also is an ideal community for administrator looking for a long-term fit. New England character, going through tons of economic development, opportunities for more economic development. This really checks all the boxes for me. So that's what brings me here tonight.
Okay, Chase, you want to go first?
Kate, are you familiar with a town meeting form of government?
I am, yes. So in all the towns I've worked in, we've had open town meeting government.
And you have no problem standing up and presenting during town meeting?
Absolutely not. I did have experience, my first experience was in Westboro, where I presented an article for economic development to develop a small business grant opportunity. So in my other experience, I have not been presenting, but a lot of, collecting information, the logistics of setting up a town meeting, communication, getting the information out there, and then finally in Dover, really, working with the town administrator and putting the warrant together and the articles and everything like that.
Right. You have a strong economic development background. What's a project that you're really proud of that you had a part of?
Mm-hmm. So many, not so many projects that I'm proud of, but, I do, I naturally lean towards economic development because it is a huge interest of mine. In Westboro, probably the proudest I am of one of the projects was creating the small business grant program. And that really came out of the need on my first few weeks I was there, where I just walked around literally and introduced myself to any business that would allow me in. Just introducing myself, telling them what my role is, and that from there, the feedback I got was, we need help. All the other towns, especially towns that we compete with at that time, Marlborough, Worcester, they're cities, so they have a lot of grant programs, and Westboro did not have any. So I think the creation of that grant and, the feedback from the small business community, that is definitely something I'm really proud of.
Great. How's your relationship with staff and residents? You have an open door policy?
Absolutely. Ironically, or I don't actually have a door in my office right now. But I think that's a good example. To me, this whole business is really about relationship building, and whether that's with residents, the Board of Selectmen, committees, boards, and staff. That's kind of how I've experienced it well in all my other jobs. I've been able to kind of pop my head into the town manager's office or town administrators and ask a question and get advice. And that is how I operate. I'm very approachable, and, I treat people with respect.
I'm going to pass it over to you.
Sure. I see you got hired by the town of Dover right before the pandemic started, so that's great timing. So my question is, what is something positive that you took away from being part of a municipality during COVID and the challenges you had to overcome? What's something you took away from it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Talk about coming in and then, literally everything goes off the table, right? The sky is falling municipal-wise and just nationally and globally. I think one of the hardest things was really, morale staff. That is something I take very seriously. And, at one point, with not a lot of guidance from the state and federal level at that point, there just wasn't enough information. People are coming to me with health concerns, whether or not they should come in the office and things like that. So that really struck me as, they're really trying to trust me with their health. They're concerned about themselves, they're concerned about their families, and for me, that's something I definitely take seriously. So that was really challenging at first, and that really just, for me, it was, public health wasn't really on my radar, to be honest. So that was new for me, but again, it's really reaching out to other communities. We really bonded together in our district there in the county. Pick up the phone, we have very active listers, what other communities are doing, and that really helped us because we, as you guys know, there wasn't a lot of how-tos or guidance at that point. And, I really picked that up from the MMA because a big part of my job there was writing stories about communities and how they are accomplishing goals and things like that. So, that was huge for me. We really leaned heavily on our fellow towns around here, and we exchanged documents and protocols and policies and things like that. But I will say, kind of wrap that up, is that communication during that entire period with staff, it was really scary. And, people's health and lives, serious stuff that I've never experienced before. And so I learned that communication is key. You can't assume anyone knows anything. You can't assume they know what to do. And staff want to be told, what they need to do. So that to me was huge. And, again, with communication, everything still, flowed. I mean, we had to adapt and we had to make moves, and we, went hybrid for a little bit, then we went back, had a skeleton crew, but services never stopped. And to me, it was a good example of why we have an emergency preparedness director. Everything kind of just made sense. And, we would meet a few times. At first, for the first year, we'd meet every week, like an emergency management team. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing I think I got out of the COVID challenge.
Yeah, and then kind of piggybacking off of that, how people work has changed a lot. Are you somebody that likes to be in the office 5 days a week, or are you somebody who prefers like a flex day where you would be able to work from home?
Yeah, so I've never experienced that. I've always been in the office 5 days a week. With that small period in COVID when we were kind of figuring stuff out in the beginning. I'm open to looking into things for, for staff, if they're interested, department head. I do think we have to start looking at other ways to retain staff. This is a changing workforce, this is a changing, people are working from home, and, they're really evaluating work-life balance right now. So, to me, the most important thing is providing services to the citizens. So I think if that is still, if we're still able to do that, I would definitely be open to looking into other things for staff, if it made sense, for the role, if it made sense for the town. I'm always looking for new and better ways to do things. And I think, as we can see now with retention and people, the massive market that's out there right now, people are really evaluating, is this a place where I want to work, So long answer to your question, I would be open to that. Personally, I've only experienced in the office 5 days a week. I think, I think there's a balance. I think management being in the office 5 days a week, I think that's important. Everyone has things they have to do during their life, and I understand that. And, if I can make someone's life easier, if they come in an hour later one day or something like that, as long as they do their job and can committed to providing the services, and their office is open during the time stated, I don't have a problem with that. Me, myself, I would be here 5 days a week.
Where are you living?
I live in Holden.
Okay. Just curious about commute, that's all.
Yeah. It's definitely a better commute for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
You done, Chase?
You already went.
Oh,
Yeah.
see, I told you I lose track. Jamie?
Sure. Hi, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
So what have your experience around human resources been?
So one of my first positions was in Wayland. I was the HR assistant, really, kind of in the weeds as far as, the entire hiring, recruitment, job description process. That was really my first HR experience. From there, I've attended any HR webinar or workshop that is provided to me. There's things changing all the time. In Dover, I am the HR director. I'm, the only person doing HR. So I've learned a lot. So yeah, it kind of, the buck stops here when it comes to, the basics of, recruiting, hiring, retention, performance evaluations. Also just day-to-day things that come up, as it's just hard to quantify it, but, dealing with personnel issues, discipline, and things like that.
You mentioned retention. What ideas do you have around sort of municipal employee retention?
I have a lot of ideas. I think about it way too much, I think. It's always harder. I think the challenge is for smaller towns. We don't have a lot of people on the bench. This comes also with succession planning to me. I think about that as well. I do, as I mentioned before, with the option to, be a little flexible with people. I do think that we can learn a lot from how well towns and cities adapted during COVID, but also, the private sector. And, are all things, we can't obviously take on all the private sector practices, but I think there's a lot of things we can learn from that, and it's just things like providing some flexibility. Let's see. I think another idea, I know the private sector, they, in chances for merit bonuses or things like that. It's done sometimes at the administrator or department head level, but it's not common at all in municipalities. I think, a lot of employees, when they get to their last step in these pay plans, they don't really have a lot of, they can't move up, and they'll have the COLA or something like that. So in some way, like I'm always looking for ways to energize people and to encourage them, take on new projects and things like that. And, I'm always focus and wondering how we can make, this work environment flexible, and we want employees to stay. We want them to stay for a long time. And, so offering training, workforce development. I'm really into training for staff as far as something comes up with the state or the MMA or something like that. That was always done for me, so that's just something instilled in me. Getting to know people and their interest. Do they think, finance right now, it's really hard to find anyone in any financial system. So there's a lot of things like that. Are you interested in maybe being a treasurer collector one day, and providing them with those resources.
Okay. What about labor relations? What's your experience been like in the municipal unions?
Yeah. So in Dover, we just wrapped up our negotiations with the highway union, and that was the first time I've been, I would say, at the table. The other instances are in Wayland, where did pretty much all the research, collecting of documents, comparison of rates and towns and things like that, and communications with the labor unions. But in Dover, this was my first, my first time at the table. I enjoyed it. I will say, even at the start at the MMA, I've been going to collective bargaining seminars, either writing stories about them, or, when I was in municipalities, going there to learn for 12 years. So I've always had the interest, and I've had the opportunity the last 2 years to participate in that, and I definitely enjoyed it. We were lucky. It was a great outcome. I know a lot of towns, sometimes it doesn't happen that way, but as I've learned in these seminars and in practice, I think you have to approach it with respect. These are people's livelihoods, right? We come in with numbers, realities of what the town can afford, what other towns are doing, non-union staff and things like that. But these are their livelihoods, and I think if you can come in with respect, ultimately they'll respect that you're doing the best that you can for them, but also the town is number one priority if we can afford this, right? So there's a little dance to it, going back and forth a few times, and I don't think anyone walks away completely happy, but I think that's kind of when it was a good negotiation.
I don't have any other
Okay,
questions.
just follow up on your answer to Jamie. You said you sat at the table. Were you the lead negotiator, or?
I was along with the town administrator.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, now what direct budget experience have you had?
My direct budget experience would include, in Westboro, I was a department of one, small, so that was my first experience really owning up to having my own little budget. But in Dover is really where, we started from day one. I will say we walked in kind of in a transition. My town administrator started probably like 8 months, maybe a year before me, but replacing administrator that was there for over 20 years. So a lot of things, we just, there wasn't a lot of policies, basically. Let's just say that. Not a lot of things written down. So that was one of the first things was bringing in, was getting a grant and bringing in the Collins Center and doing best practices for all our financial policies. And so I've really, one by one, we've gone over every financial policy, the best practice, comparing it to what has been done in the town, and then kind of figuring out how to make it fit to Dover. So I went through that entire process. We also helped create like a budget book. And also, again, a how-to guide of a timeline, something that, we didn't walk into, but, always thinking about, the next person in this role. So that is my experience doing that. I will say I reach out to department heads, when it comes to budget time, although I guess one could say it's a year-round process. So talking with them and helping them, figure out getting their budget documents to us and to the town administrator. A big thing in Dover, and I think in a lot of municipalities that are very horizontally organized, a lot of boards don't report to the town administrator. So one of our big things stepping in was getting consensus and, getting people to send us their budgets so we can budget the entire picture. And surprisingly, they've done that, in the past. I'm not, and it's worked out, but, it helps gives us a better picture when we're doing the budget if we know everyone's budget. And that really, I think, is a little relationship building, a little, getting people to be like, oh yeah, that does make sense, And, again, people are very sensitive when it comes to, well, I report to a board and things like that. And, that is true. But I think, relationship building and getting people on board, like this big picture will actually be helpful for everyone. And that has successfully been, I will say that was the first year there, and the second year is successfully kind of wrapping that up. And I will say the second year was so much easier than the first year. So that has been my experience. I'm at the table. I'm working with the town administrator. We actually have a consultant right now as our interim finance director. We haven't had that, so a lot of that has fallen to the town administrator's office. Good opportunity for me, learning wise. So, long answer to your question, but it's been.
Oh, no, that's okay.
It's been. I've been at the table participating, and I'm definitely, if I were to get this role, definitely looking forward to working. I know you have a strong finance director. Definitely looking forward to working with her.
So I was a little confused, though. I probably heard wrong. Do you have departments that don't report?
Yes, we do.
Who do they report to?
Their chair, their board. We have, I want to say, 4. It's kind of, Wayland was similar kind of organizational structure. And, a lot of, actually, Wayland just changed to town manager. They just completely overhauled it. But, it is a struggle in towns like that where, you have to get consensus or you can't do your job. Technically they don't report to us. I mean, ultimately, an administrator signs off on the warrant and things like that, but they don't report to us.
Now, could you give me an example of a department that doesn't?
Sure. Well, I would say the assessor. The assessor does not report to us. She reports to the chair of the Board of Assessors. That said, our personnel rules and regulations all fall, she does have to comply with them. But when it comes to, she does have a contract. But when it comes to things like, giving her budget to us first, it's not in her, she doesn't have to, she does, which is nice. But, reporting days off, things like that, it does not, her performance evaluation, the chair does that. Things like that.
Well, how do you get an overall town budget if they're all doing it separately?
I mean, they've made it work. They've made it work previously before, but it's difficult because sometimes we don't get the pieces to the end, and that's kind of where you're kind of scrambling. But with this new process, with the help of the Collins Center, my town administrator's experience with budgeting and things like that, and bringing his experience, we've really overhauled the entire process, and it's more streamlined, and it makes more sense, and it doesn't change anyone's reporting or anything like that. It just helps us, big picture, complete it, and the process is just more smoother.
Do you have a finance committee in town?
We have a warrant committee. Yes.
Not strictly finance. They look at
That's correct.
all the warrants.
Yep. And they handle, we also have a capital committee as well.
Too many papers. Okay, now negotiating experience.
As far as like labor relations and things like that.
Contracts.
Yep. So I've dealt with that in Dover. Obviously my experience with the highway union just recently, but we also, like I said, we have some department heads that have contracts. Not huge, a lot of negotiating going on there. I deal with contracts when it comes to procurement. No, I feel like I do a lot of negotiating. It's just not in an official role. Again, with the consensus building and getting people to come on board with things, when they officially don't have to. I always feel like I'm kind of in that role. But yeah, that would be my experience when it comes to negotiations. When it comes to like hiring and things like that, there's not really a lot of room to play with as far as our structure when it comes to offering salaries and things like that.
Yeah, see, we have unions that need to be negotiated with and hirings that,
A lot of big positions.
yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We really do. And it's a big job. I'm glad I don't have to.
It is, and a big transition for the town as well.
Okay, what do you consider a successful working relationship between Board of Selectmen and a TA?
I would say definitely open communication, trust on both sides, and then it's my job to earn that. But I think that's huge. Biweekly check-ins with the chair, and I think getting to know you all will help me figure out what kind of communication you prefer and what kind of communication you need. But yeah, trust. I would hope that you could pick up your cell and give me a call if you ever had a concern, and I hope that I could do the same, and that's what I would work for. That would be important to me. And a lot of the values that I would have with staff, as far as being approachable and things like that. I really think it's important to have goals, agreed upon goals, either, whether we call them Board of Selectmen goals or administrator goals or things like that, yearly in a public meeting, with a document kind of like projecting the timeline and having quarterly check-ins and mid-year check-ins publicly so the public can know what we're doing. I think that is huge. And, of course, it being listed on the website so everyone can see and have access to it. But I think that is essential, I think, for our relationship as well. So I can be held accountable and, everything is public and open and transparent for everyone to see what we're doing and, all the work everyone's doing.
Okay, you're in the HR, so how do you handle difficult employee situations?
My first response is always to figure out what's going on. Sometimes it's not as easy as just sending out a warning and then a written warning and going through the process. A lot of times it's just communication issues, or an employee wasn't aware of certain expectations they had, or maybe their department head needs some training as far as communication and things like that. So for me, it's always sitting down with the staff member and really getting to the root of the problem. And from there, what can I offer them? Can we get some more training, workforce development, coaching, maybe if something serious and I could see the problem, maybe going to, check in 3 months, let's make some goals for those 3 months and check in then to see if something has to go further. That is always my first approach. And I've found that is pretty successful. I will say that, there's always something there's always going to be something that happens, or an employee who's not on board. And to me that, if all the other efforts do not turn out well or successful, follow disciplinary action, unfortunately. That would be my last step. But for me, sitting down, figuring out the problem, and then mapping out a path to, how can we fix this?
Okay, what's the total budget in your position now? Well, I mean the town budget.
The town budget. So Dover, I'm just trying to think. Off the top of my head. Out of
39 million?
Yes.
That
was last
including
year.
school?
Yes. And we are part of the regional school district. We also have one school that is under us. That is separate.
Okay, you don't offhand know the split, though?
I'm sorry?
You offhand don't know the split between percentage for schools and municipality?
Offhand, I don't. I want to say it's 70-30.
On the school?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. We
Like-
share that with Sherburne.
Yeah, like most places, it's a lot of kids around. Okay, does anybody have any follow-up questions?
I don't know.
Do you have any questions for us?
I do, and I'm sensitive to the time. I know you guys had a lot of meetings this week.
It's okay.
Part of the gig.
I know.
Get paid well. 0.
Yeah, I'm just interested in, I've done a lot of research. I've watched a lot of meetings, and that's okay, because I like to. I've looked at budgets and town reports and things like that. So, for me, I see maybe one of the biggest challenges, and I'd like to get your opinion on this, but, the balance between economic development and, keeping the character of Sturbridge and the reason why people come and live here and want to raise a family here and want to take advantage of the historic sites and the trails and the open space. And, not an issue in Dover, a little different. There's 0 economic development and no want for any. But I would say every other town, I think, is facing kind of like this question is, we need things, we need services. I know there's playing fields, DPW, public safety building, not to mention the senior center. But then, they don't want things to change, or, they don't like what comes with it, I would say, I would say that's probably Sturbridge's biggest challenge right now. But I'm interested in any other, challenges that you think would be something on my priority list.
Well, that's always been a challenge going way back. And we try to deal with it the best we can. And we do have several people, proponents on both sides. The challenge I've always considered is taxes and supplying the people with the services they want. Because the cost of everything goes up. And taxes go up, but they go up everywhere. But that's always a challenge, though. Economically providing the proper services. Because we have great schools, police department, fire department, highway. Our boards and committees are all top-notch. So, input from you folks?
I would agree with our chair that the services versus the taxes is always a tough one, and I would agree with your assessment too, how to properly develop the town without losing our character. And now we're going to be faced with more challenges as Charlton is developing, pretty heavy industrial, and our roads are going to take a beating from it.
We're in a unique geographic position of being a quaint New England town at the intersection of the 2 largest highways in the area. And then you run into, over the last 2 years, that logistics have become, such a big issue, and shipping and freight. And when you're at, the intersection that we're at, it's obviously attractive for the Amazons and the other places of the world. And that's something that this town has definitely shown resistance to. And now it's landed just over the border, and they're still going to utilize our exit. I think trying to carefully figure out how we can take advantage of our geography and try to maintain the reason why a lot of people moved here.
Right.
Is definitely difficult, but a lot of people want large town level services in a town that isn't a large town. So how do you afford that? Well, everybody pays more, and that's kind of, as long as everybody's okay with paying more, well, it's fine. But at some point, it's going to get to be too much, and then you're going to have to cut services or, find another way to pay for it. And that's definitely I'd say that's the number one thing that every situation we run into, it's kind of all comes back to who's going to pay for it. And it's right now, it's all on the homeowners, you know, and our restaurant taxes and our hotel taxes do contribute, but we're all paying for it if you own a home in Sturbridge, so, yeah.
Right.
You know, we do have a couple of companies going in on Route 20, which will give us more revenue as far
Cold
as
storage.
cold
We're opening
storage.
2 cold storage
I was
places,
reading
yeah.
that. Is the economic development / tourism coordinator part-time?
No, full-time. I believe Terry's full-time.
It's closer to it, right? We took it from true
took it-
part-time up to the next level, but I don't think he's
When Kevin was here, Kevin was,
like very part-time.
yeah,
20
but
hours a
if
week or
it's not
something.
full-time, it's close to full-time.
That's great. That's great that on staff.
He does do an amazing, he does a great job.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's tough because we get people, if you go on Facebook, you know, why don't we have this, why don't we have this, you know? And it's not our decision, and it's not the economic development coordinator's position, it's the business, you know, they decide where they'd like to go,
Right.
you know, but,
Some people think we single-handedly drove J.C. Penney out of town.
oh, I know, and we closed the theater.
Brick and mortar and theaters,
Yeah.
2 businesses that are
Jamie, do you
dying in
want
this
to,
economy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, well, there's the hardline practical stuff, which is like Route 20 is a mess.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is because Charlton has what are pretty rampantly unresponsible business practices. And not to pull any shots, but it is let's call a horse a horse.
Yeah.
But it is the value of a small town, protecting the neighborhoods and being able to have sustainable economy that doesn't end up costing you just a lot more money in 20 years, which I think is a lot of the stuff we end up dealing with. So it's hard, and it's not, and this board doesn't get to make that decision, but, you know, I'm quite optimistic about Sturbridge. I think we're a town that people seem to be engaging more in their community than less in their community, which is not true for most places.
Absolutely.
I mean, we had, I don't know, 1,100 people at the town meeting for,
Best attended one since.
yeah, and that's,
In
you
a
know,
lo- in a long time. There was
Yeah,
some,
no, that-
there was
and
some hot button issues that.
but
that-
That's
they're hot button, but not compared to some towns that are like laying people off and
Yeah.
firing people. Like, these are luxury problems on some level, and so I guess the you know, on balance, this is a community that's engaged and informed and wants to figure out how to do these things in a smart way. So it's a pretty yeah. And so you know, I think it's everything everybody said to some extent, but compared to places, there are places with real problems, and we ain't got them.
No, and we haven't. We've always been, well, we hire good people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say that's definitely something that stuck out to me as far as citizen engagement here. You know, I do think it is pretty high comparably to other communities. And I would add that, again, it's another thing that I think about at night is really, you know, how can we make volunteering easier or more accessible to people, right? I know, it is really a full-time job. And, you know, I get it. I get, you know, 7 o'clock at night meeting 3 times a week. You know, that's hard to do. And a lot of people, it's not even on their radar. So it's definitely something I'm always thinking about, especially with communication, is how can we get the information out that's accessible, but also, you know, that, you know, people can understand a lot of these concepts, you know, are kind of complex, especially with like financial things and things like that. So, you know, information coming out when it comes to communication, you know, I'm really big on that, and also just making it accessible, using images, infographics, and things like that, I think is helpful. But also, you know, in Dover, we have a very active, you know, volunteers boards, as you know, some employees report to them. You know, they're very proud of their history in their town and the form of government and that. But, you know, a lot of, you know, younger residents with families are frustrated because they want to get involved, but they just don't have the time and commitment. And also, these are really, you know, a lot of the information is not accessible. So again, just again, looking through your website and things like that, That would definitely be a priority for me as well, along with maybe a redesign, refresh, I would say. But also just, I think there was a lot of good information there. But, I always think about user end. I just moved to town, and I'm on the website. How do I understand the website? I've been looking at websites, municipal websites, for 15 years, and that's not the norm. So, I'm always thinking about that, and again, you're always thinking about the future, right? Like who's going to be here in 10 years in your seat, in 20 years, consistency and passing along the institutional knowledge and things like that. Just side note, but it's just something I'm always thinking about.
It is tough to get information out because I haven't seen it yet, but somebody's going to write something. I didn't know there was an election, and it's out there. It's on the website. It's announced at meetings. We don't have local papers anymore. I mean, we do, but they're 2 weeks late,
Right.
It's tough to get the information out to people. And a lot of the problem is people don't want to look for the information,
Right. Right.
Some of the questions people ask on Facebook in the morning, is the school closed? Call the school.
School calls you if you're.
Sign up.
I don't think,
Sign up for the, they have that, what do they call it now?
Code red.
Oh, red, where you get a call. You might not like the call at 5:30.
We're also
telling you
lucky
there's
to
no
have
school.
a lot of residents who are experts on one thing or another, and that when we run into the situation where like, it's not something I know anything about, there's usually somebody who stands up and says, well, I've been paying attention to this for 10 years, and I was just kind of waiting for you guys to catch up, and they're willing to give all their information to us and help us make a decision, which is great, because ultimately, we're just here representing everybody, and if you can help us do a better job, then we
Right.
definitely want
It
to,
is
we want
tough
to
to get
engage
the
you in that.
information out, and it's tough to get volunteers.
It is. Yeah.
Perfect example. You okay? Do you want him in?
People are so busy too, trying to manage their own lives. Like you said, it's hard to find time, and
I've never attended a Holden meeting. I vote, but it's a struggle. I mean, again, because my
With all
job,
the work.
but I get it. I completely get it. Yeah.
Yeah, because we have, everybody complains about Charter, well, now Spectrum. And our contract is coming up, so
Okay.
we've advertised for a committee. And what do we have, Michelle? 2 people, 3 people? And this is, yeah. Yeah. And this has been out, 6 weeks.
said it again. If you want to go to war with Charter, now's your chance.
But the trouble is, there's not much.
There's not a lot of
when you're
flexibility.
negotiating with them, because
yeah.
you were on the board the last time we negotiated, weren't you?
Correct,
And it's, the elderly, yes, they would like this, but we don't give that. It's tough.
Unless you're going to spend $10 million on municipal internet.
Yeah, which is,
That's the only.
which
only
people
approach.
want, and the trouble is, you need your own electric company. And I'm not even sure the state allows municipalities to build their own electric, like
Hudson's-
Shrewsbury has.
Hudson still does too. Hudson Light and Power.
Yeah, and
Yep.
they've had it.
They've had it forever. Yeah.
That's it. So, can you imagine the price tag on those things? Yeah. So do you have any other questions?
I don't. I thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Coming in?
I don't take applying to a position like this lightly, so I do really think I'm a good fit for Sturbridge, but also just, where Sturbridge is right now and the challenges that you're facing. So yeah, thank you again for your time.
Okay, we will have a meeting tomorrow morning for our discussion and vote. So you'll hear tomorrow sometime,
Okay,
one way or the other. Okay?
thank you so much. I'm sorry, there's another meeting. So
No, it's
Fourth one
okay.
this
Oh, no, it's all right. We signed up for it. We can't complain.
Yeah.
Take care. Have a good night.
That's Thursday. What's on Bull? Not till 9, though.
That's right.
All right. I think we have to move to adjourn, right?
Right.
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Discussion?